Christmas, of course, is all about bringing people together, family, communities, all of us celebrating in the way that we traditionally do. And it's the tradition, therefore, to turn on the lights with that familiar start. So can you please join me when I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... Yay! It worked!
Good evening. Well, the winter fuel allowance has gone for 10 million pensioners. It was a very big parliamentary majority of 120 for the government.
If there was much of a honeymoon for Keir Starmer, it's coming to a chilly end, with a backlash against the government's decision to withdraw winter fuel payments from most pensioners. Here in Shoreham, where voters recently switched from the Conservatives to Labour, there was anger.
It's politically insane to make your very first announcement that you're taking money away from pensioners, many of whom are already struggling.
Let us deal with the eviction notices for tomorrow, Mr. Cratchit.
Tomorrow's Christmas, sir.
Very well. You may gift wrap them.
The Housing Association have put extra insulation in the loft. They've put cavity wall insulation in. But that's not going to help if I can't turn the heating on in the cold. The place is going to get damp. But I can't afford to turn the heating on.
One of my constituents who's spoken out really strongly on this is Jim O'Dwyer. Now, I mentioned Jim because he's somebody that I met during the campaign, and he's 99 years old, and he did 31 missions in a Lancaster bomber as tail end Charlie in World War II. And the reason he won't get the winter fuel allowance is because he has a very, very small private pension that comes in. And Jim Dwyer is very clear about it. He says, look, this is disgusting. After all I've done for the country, why am I being treated this way?
Hyperthermia sweepstake. We're taking bets on who's gone next.
What? Have you lost your mind?
Last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. His Paymaster General went a step further. He said these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
And Scots across the country are preparing for the coldest front since 1972, with temperatures set to drop to as much as -12 in many parts of the west of Scotland. Social services are advising mothers with young children and the elderly to remain indoors unless absolutely necessary.
Well, that's the odds slashed across the board.
I went to Dewsbury winter before last, in the height of the energy prices going up, and spoke to an 84-year-old woman, worked all her life, obviously now a pensioner, and she told me that she doesn't get out of bed till midday because she didn't want to turn the heating on.
Yeah, it's awful.
And then when she did get out of bed, she had this sort of thermal jacket that she just wore all day long, so she didn't have to put the heating up very high. That's an awful position to put a pensioner in.
Yeah.
And there are just too many of those stories.
Old age pensioners lobbying their MPs for a better deal from the government. It's an annual pre-budget ritual. But there's added point this year because the government is about to announce the results of a major review into our whole social security system. And the early signs aren't good. TVI has been looking at the impact of recent policy changes on the very poorest of our old people, at the time of year that they find toughest of all, the winter.
I think the connection between poverty and cold conditions is absolutely fundamental. We're talking about very many old people in this country, many of whom are on supplementary benefits, who really have very little amount of money to juggle with each week, and therefore are making decisions each week about whether they can heat their homes properly or eat properly. So poverty is fundamental to this issue.
What's happened then in recent years? Has life become tougher for these old people most at risk?
It was always very tough. I mean, we found that about 10%, 1 in 10 of old people were at risk from the cold, in the sense that they were likely to become hypothermic during very cold weather. But recently, of course, electricity and gas prices have shot up. And so this whole business of trying to pay the fuel bill and yet keep reasonably warm is one that's become more and more of a problem with each passing winter.
we shall have a harder Christmas than we have known since the war.
Indeed, it's true that cold kills. Labour themselves thought up to 4,000 people every winter would die if this was removed.
The government want us to die. They expect us to die. Tony Blair's like that. Come here, you, my wee government lackey. How many old bastards died last night? 1,500. Oh, smashing. That'll free up some housing stock.
The fact that they released prisoners to the sound of champagne corks popping in the streets of Brixton on the same day that they voted to freeze pensioners to death. I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent.
Cabinet ministers argue the savings are necessary.
Ahead of the budget, there will be more difficult spending decisions, but it's a terrible economic situation that we've inherited, and we're really, really angry about that. There's no two ways about it.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
Many can't go there, and some would rather die.
If they would rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Mr. Speaker, before the election, this Prime Minister said he would lower energy bills by £300. Since he took office, they've gone up by £149. He said he would protect the winter fuel payment, but now he's in power, he stripped it off our pensioners. And he said he lined up for many photos with waspy women, saying he'd have their backs, and he's just betrayed them in the most scandalous way possible. This is now the defining characteristic of this one-trick phony Prime Minister who says one thing and does another. Does he understand? Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt?